Folks, big news. Seattle becomes the largest United States city to decriminalize psychedelics. That's right, folks. It's happening again. Seattle City Council approved a resolution Monday to decriminalize non-commercial activity around a wide range of psychedelic substances, including the cultivation and sharing of psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, ibogaine, and non-peyote-derived mescaline. The landmark measure extends what is already Seattle City policy to not arrest or prosecute people for personal drug possession, to further protect the cultivation and sharing of psychedelic plants and fungi for religious, spiritual, healing, or personal growth practices. The legislation, passed by unanimous vote, declares that the investigation, arrest, and prosecution of anyone engaging in entheogen-related activities should be among the City of Seattle's lowest enforcement priorities, and requests the city's police department move toward the formal codification and adoption of that practice as department policy. Now, something that's very important to understand about these kinds of laws is that police still can technically bust you if they want, but it'll probably get thrown out in court. That's one of the things you have to understand about this. There's a lot of these areas where they have decriminalized, like especially when marijuana was being decriminalized. You look at California, there's giant marijuana busts all the time in California, right? But a lot of them get thrown out in court. So that's something that you need to understand here. But either way, let's continue. Further, it expresses the council's intent to determine what changes would be necessary to protect from arrest or prosecution individuals who cultivate entheogens, and to make those changes through a subsequent ordinance. Those non-addictive, natural substances have real potential in clinical and therapeutic settings to make a really significant difference in people's lives, Councilmember Andrew Lewis, who introduced the resolution, said before the vote. This resolution really sets the stage as the first significant action in the state of Washington to move this policy forward. Now, again, I don't know much about Seattle's local politics. I don't know if this guy's a good guy outside of this, but either way, this is some pretty great stuff. Entheogens, commonly known as psychedelics, have been shown to benefit the well-being of individuals suffering from depression, check, severe anxiety, check, problematic substance abuse, check, post-traumatic stress, check, and end-of-life anxiety, unchecked for now, grief, check, and intergenerational trauma, question mark. A press release from the councilman's office said, these and other physical and mental conditions are plaguing many communities, which have been further demonstrated to be exacerbated by the impact of COVID-19. The resolution was inspired in part by the city council's interest in reducing opioid-related deaths. Members in June formally asked a local task force studying the overdose crisis to examine public policy governing psychedelic medicines. 3 months later, the task force recommended the city decriminalize psychedelics and consider removing criminal penalties around all drugs. There it is, folks. Meanwhile, members of the advocacy group Decriminalize Seattle has spent more than 2 years lobbying the council to end penalties for cultivating and sharing psychedelics. In May, the group submitted a draft ordinance to Lewis's office at the council members' request. So you can read the rest of this article if you'd like. Let's see what Shama Sawant says. During debate on the local measure on Monday, Councilmember Shama Sawant questioned why the vehicle for the policy change was a resolution rather than a formal ordinance that would amend the city's municipal code. All right, good point, good point. We have not pushed for resolutions in place of ordinances when it is possible and realistic and necessary from a political and moral standpoint for the council to have an ordinance passed to decriminalize psychedelics, she said, adding that to decriminalize in fact rather than just in rhetoric would require an ordinance, and it is the city council, not the police department, that has the authority to pass such an ordinance. This is what I'm saying as well previously, is that a lot of these city council stuff, what they do is they basically just say, hey, cops, don't do this. And then they, work with prosecutors to say, yeah, we're just going to throw this shit out. So that doesn't mean you're fully protected. I think that these things should be completely legalized. I think that they should be heavily invested in education, right? I think that there should be there's almost no education on psychedelics because people are afraid to talk about it, because they don't want to go to jail, which I get that, right? But anyway, there needs to be a lot more education in these substances for sure. Because, you know, this is not something you should do, like, willy-nilly. Oh, I'm gonna go to the store, buy 10 grams of mushrooms, and just, like, you know, go on the subway and munch down. That is not recommended. But again, in a good and well-regulated environment, this stuff can be great. I can say for my personal, you know, I've used mushrooms a lot over the last year. And I have definitely gotten to a much better place in my life because of it, I think. That I probably would be a completely different person if I did not have access to the mushroom over the last year, for me personally. So it's been a life-changing experience for me as well. And again, with proper education, I think that these things should be available for all human beings on Earth. I mean, when you think about it, human beings since, you know, before we were humans, you know, mammals have been consuming psychedelic funguses, psychoactive plants in general, and they've shaped the way that humans have evolved in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, that there's not hard evidence on that, but I mean, what we do have is evidence from the earliest human civilizations, having cave paintings, constructing statues, constructing hieroglyphics, you know, all that stuff, based around the mushroom. I mean, there's a lot of these ancient ceremonies that have been dated 40,000, 50,000 years previous, that are based around psychedelic mushrooms. So, I mean, like, this stuff has been with us since the inception of the world, and they're going to stay with us. And the idea that anyone thinks that they can ban something that comes from the ground, I mean, you're dumb as fuck. If you, oh, I'm going to ban trees. Huh? I'm going to ban grass. What? You're going to ban grass? What are you, stupid? That's how dumb you sound if you support the ban on psychedelic mushrooms, or marijuana for that matter. But either way, really, really good stuff. And I'm moving to Seattle, folks. Boom. Let's go.